everybody, I'm Tommy, and you are on the Love Boat. What's happening? Hey, we're kind of. Does that say that backwards? Ah, damn, man! I gotta mirror this thing. Hold on. I think I can actually do that fairly quickly. Let's see something here. Look at this. Like I know what I'm doing, huh? Do. One more second, peeps. Ah, screw it. You know what? I'm liable to screw up the feed. We'll just live with it. Hey, Lisa Trimble, Renee B, how are you? Scooby Lee, what's up? Jane Aldrich, Clifton Ferguson. Boy, I'm glad you're all here. Right? Wouldn't be a show without you. Brock Bandy, how you doing? Roberta, good to see you. Jane Aldrich, Jeremy Fowler, Kristen Melinda, swinging a wrench. We're going to get back to some of the old roots here, Brock Bandy. And by that I mean, hey, Caroline in Canada, I'm going to be doing a little true crime tonight. And I'm doing this one because so many of you, honestly, I got so many people that said, hey, can you please weigh in on the Bryan Kohberger thing? This is an odd way, an odd chance for us to look at the legal system. Hey, Tommy Bird. Hey, Linda, from a kind of a different angle. Barbara's here. Whine a little bit more. How are you? This is going to give us a chance to talk about some things that normally we don't get a chance to bring up. Often when I'm talking, Tony Zuder, how are you? Often when I'm talking about true crime, it really kind of gets to sentencing more than anything else. Wow, Scooby Lee, helping people get better in their lives without meaning to. That's the story of my life, right? Honestly, it's kind of what this channel was about. At first, it was just going to be a place for people to come and hang out. But I brought everybody together, and everybody started helping everybody. Absolutely blew me away. Taylor Miller, good to see you. Scooby Lee, I'm glad you're doing that, right? You're leaving the earth a better place than you found it, whether you're doing it on purpose or it just happens to come naturally. The result is the same, and that's really kind of all that matters. At least I think so, right? That kind of makes sense to me. Just Joan, good to see you. If you are unfamiliar with the Bryan Kohberger case, first of all, I don't know how that's possible, right? I really don't, because it got so much attention. This was a hideous case where a guy named Bryan Kohberger murdered four beautiful people in absolutely the start of their life. This happened on Greek Row, right, at a college. And it was one of those brutal crime scenes that, destroys cops, honestly, things that they talk about for the rest of their career. You know what? That sounds absolutely perfectly, doesn't it? I was just honest with them, and they reflected because of me telling them my honest observations when they asked me. Boy, oh boy. That's what therapists do, I think. What was his reason, says Clifton Ferguson? I'll tell you what. That's a question that no one is ever going to be able to answer. I'm going to weigh in on it, but no one's ever going to be able to answer that question. Sammy Sue, how are you? And here's my thought on this, right? I think he's a psychopath, right? In the truest sense of the word. I don't think whenever we look for answers in places that there are no answers, very often we start going down the conspiratorial road, right? We start going down that rabbit hole, whether we mean to or not. Great example of that. And I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not weighing in on anything. I'm not saying this was a conspiracy, and I sure as hell am not saying it wasn't. But let's look at what happened in Oklahoma City, right? The Oklahoma City bombing, or what happened at the World Trade Centers, right? When it's such a tragedy that you can't wrap your brain around why someone would do it. Hey, Barbara, we begin to look for things that make sense. And if we can't find one, then we'll come up with a conspiracy theory of sorts. And that's just human nature, I think. It was one of the causes of the satanic panic, which we lived through in North America, where they were seeing Satan everywhere they looked, right? Literally everywhere they looked, because they were looking for him. And once that panic started, a lot of people's lives got destroyed because they were wearing the wrong t-shirt, right? They listened to the wrong kind of music, and we began to look for things. The West Memphis 4, a case where a murder of 2 young children that ended up, I believe it was 2, that ended up getting blamed on these 4 boys, one of whom was, he was learning disabled, right? It's probably the best way to put it. And the cops beat up on him. The cops went in and took someone that, really didn't understand exactly what was going on, and they bullied him into a confession. Now, none of the other guys confessed, but if you've been sitting in a cop room and you're just confused, hey, Tommy Bird, Sandy, Wendy, what's happening? Hey, Kellyanne, if you're sitting in there and the room is always cold, always, if you're getting interrogated, they make it cold on purpose. It's not an accident. The room is freezing, and they leave you in there long enough to get miserable and long enough to panic. This is absolutely their goal, right? The whole time you're in there panicking, right? Yes. Yeah, that's it, right? Very real. But no doubt wrong people got charged. Absolutely. What ends up happening, they leave you in a room for a really long period of time. Then a cop comes in. The whole time you're in there, you're handcuffed, right? And if they're good at it, you're handcuffed behind your back, right? So you're just pissed miserable. You're in there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And the first guy that comes in says the same thing almost every time. They say it one way or another. Hey, Chow, young smut, good to see you, Cricket. They come in and go, oh my God, have they left your hands cuffed like that the entire time? God, hey, who did that? Right? Somebody give me a key. Oh man, that's awful. I feel awful. This is horrible. Then they get those handcuffs off you. And the idea being, now you got a friend. Hey, Pooh Bear, this is literally the good cop, bad cop, right? Now, if you're working with a deficit, right? Oh, you're slightly learning disabled. That first guy that walks in really does seem like a savior. Everyone is crapped on you. You see, everybody is crapping on you. And all of a sudden, there's somebody in there that wants to help you. They also say, hey, can I get you something to drink? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Anything that I can do for you, right? And then they start to interrogate you. And they build you a golden bridge to walk across, right? The reed technique in interrogation is what most often gets used. And what they want to do is they want to give you permission to say that what you did really wasn't that bad, right? No matter how foul, right, what you're being charged with is, they're going to step it back a little, right? Hey, I mean, I realize that you killed this girl, but, we only have one side of this story, right? This is your only chance to tell your side of the story. There's always 2 sides to it. I guarantee you that there's only one of 2 options. One is you're a cold-blooded killer. You're a stone-cold murderer who last night or the night before or a month ago started to plan for this, and you really wanted her dead. Or the other option is something happened, right? Are you a stone-cold killer? And the poor kid says, no. Okay, well, then there's got to be. And they literally build you a golden bridge to walk across. And you do. And then the person says, they admit to something a little bit less. And they think that, by not saying, well, I'm a stone cold killer, I got news for you. You're going down for first-degree murder. It doesn't matter whether you're a stone cold killer or one of the other ones, right? If you take the other bridge, it doesn't matter. I've watched some of those interrogations on YouTube, and you're exactly right, almost word for word. Well, sadly, I've been in a few of those rooms. And this is lawyer, please. Sonny gets it. If you're smart, by the way, if you're smart, you're going to say, I would like a lawyer immediately. When they say, you have the right to remain silent, they play a game with that too. Because you go, yeah, I think I want to talk to an attorney. You got something to hide? Right? This is your only shot, right? Because now that what the prosecution is going to do, shut up, right? I want to talk to an attorney. You always should ask for an attorney, by the way, just in case anyone's listening who's never been in trouble. If you are guilty, you need an attorney. If you are innocent, you really need an attorney, right? Because the job of the 2 people that are going to come in there is to solve the case. And very often, they don't give a crap how that happens. And if the case is heinous, then there's a lot of pressure. And God forbid, it's so heinous that it makes newspapers, like the Bryan Kohberger case. I think that this case is a little bit more complex. Last night, somebody asked me about this, and I said, very often this happens as we start getting right up to the part where we're going to go to trial. In a couple of days, we're going to be doing the voir dire process. A couple of things happen. At that point, the prosecution can't hold back any cards, right? They have to give you discovery. Now, legal beagles are going to say, Tommy, you got to give discovery way before that. Yeah, you do. But I got news for you. They almost always hold things back that they're going to drop on you 2 or 3 weeks before it's showtime. Why? Because it's convenient. It's a beautiful thing to do, right? Drop that last nugget and the person starts realizing I got nothing, right? What's going to happen is they're going to put me to death. And that's kind of how I answered the question last night, is that as you get closer to the voir dire process, you got a better chance of cutting a deal. Now, this one is a little bit different, in my opinion. And I'll tell you why. Yeah, Bryan Kohberger didn't want to get killed, right? I think that's a big deal. He didn't want to get killed. And I know a lot of people who followed this case are angry because, damn it, this guy should have got put to death, right? This guy should have got put to death. I'm not saying that. A lot of other people are. And the fact that they are letting him do life in prison, those 4 kids in college, they didn't get to do life, right? He might get, anyway, in Plea, he may get killed in prison. He might. Yes, option 3, Tommy, you might be a smooth criminal. Wow. Yes. Well played. I think there's a little bit more to this. I think that this is not the only crimes that Bryan Kohberger has committed. I don't think this is a killer's first attempt, right? So many people said it doesn't make any sense that he was able to get in here and kill 4 people. No one heard it, right? 4 people, even if you got a knife, it kind of makes you wonder, is this guy a Navy SEAL? You would assume, right? You would assume that maybe it would have been, there would have been a lot more defensive wounds. Things would have been, anyway, we found out today that there was some fight that had been put up by some of these people. They fought for their lives, but nobody heard it. And there wasn't a whole lot of evidence that wasn't circumstantial. They did find some DNA on a knife sheath, but here's what happens, right? Here's what happens. The country, right, starts looking for an answer where there isn't one. Sometimes the answer is, man, that's a sick SOB, right? This is a person whose wiring is no good. Bad wiring. When you do time, Danique, how are you? In Nova Scotia, Canada. Danique, I will look into that. I'm not familiar with the case yet, but I will happily look into that. You're not the first person to ask me, so I probably should look into it. The Lily and Jack in Nova Scotia, Canada. I promise you, I will look into that. When there's no answer other than this guy's just sick, this is bad wiring, we look for conspiracy theories. And there was a whole lot of people online that said this guy didn't do it. Now, another thing that you can weigh in, right, that you can think about. When you get to prison, I've said this a lot. When you go to prison, you meet a bunch of different kinds of animals, right? Some of those animals just wanted to get high and they couldn't afford their drug habit and they committed crimes in order to pay for that habit. Then you meet the pure criminals, and there are very few of them, but people that just wanted to get rich and they wanted to do it illegally. People who are smart as hell and they were going to be drug dealers and they were going to, set up, but they wanted to be the bad guy. And then you get the bad wiring people. Then you get those cats and you find out about their crimes. I used to do yoga with a guy when I was at FCI Tucson, and kindest dude you ever met in your life, really. He taught a yoga class, wasn't incredibly good at yoga, but he was incredibly kind. And he got us a room where we could go in there. He had yoga mats that he got the prison to purchase. It was a really kind deal. And he talked a lot about God, just kind, older guy in his 60s. And I never talked to him one-on-one a lot. I was only there when we were in class. So I said to one of the guys, any idea what he's in for? Because my understanding is he's doing life. Like, what did this dude do? He said, oh, he was pulled over with his wife's head in the passenger seat. He had driven across 4 or 5 state lines to kill her and then was on his way back. And his wife's head, no, none of the rest of it, just her head was sitting on the passenger seat. And it didn't take a lot of great detective work. He went through a toll booth that way, right? You may have wanted to go to the one where you just toss the coins in as opposed to having somebody make change. I don't know. But it's, that's bad wiring. right? This is somebody that makes absolutely no sense, right? It just doesn't make sense. So when it doesn't make sense, we look for logic in places where there isn't any. Bryan Kohberger is the killer. And there were a lot of people that were betting the farm. I watched an awful lot of videos of people that said, he didn't do it. I promise you, there had to be another person. There had to be 3 people there, right? There had to be multiple people. This couldn't just be Bryan Kohberger. And they start looking for explanations where there isn't any. I'll give you another real factor that I'm not hearing anybody talk about, probably because it's uncomfortable to say. But his last name is going to make him a target in prison, no matter what the hell he's convicted of. Hello, Dane. As disgusting as that is, it's the truth. White prison gangs, right, adorn their bodies with swastikas. The name Coberger is going to make this guy a target because you got to kind of live up to that name, right? When you're when the person who is like the mythical figure of your entire organization is Adolf Hitler, people with names like Coberger have a very difficult time doing time because people are going to go after them. Unfair, but a stone cold fact. Cats fight. They just jump through the air. Funny. Yeah, Audra, it's a little late for me to get into the legal business. I spent too much time in the illegal business. Unfortunately, they don't like allowing people that have broken a lot of laws to get into law. I mean, there are exceptions to that rule. There was actually probably a couple of states that I could have practiced law in, and I could have been a paralegal and done it almost anywhere. But unfortunately, I didn't. That's not a road I took. Right, I went the wrong direction. Had a lot to do with drugs. Right. Coberger, good to see you. It had a lot to do with a lot of stuff, but drugs was the big one, right? Drugs was really the big one. So back to Bryan Coberger. A lot of people are saying, why the hell did they allow this dude to take the plea? Let's knock that one off the table, right? Because this is fairly easy to dissect. Why would the prosecution not just take this guy to court and make sure that, they try to get him the death penalty? 2 reasons that jump off the paper, right? One of the reasons is you never know what 12 people are going to do, right? The O.J. Simpson case is an example that people use all the time, right? You would have thought it would have been easy to convict that guy. Richard Speck killed 8 student nurses in the 60s in one go. I think Coberger could have pulled it off. He did, right? He did. He absolutely did. And he's going to have to at some point. Like, we didn't hear it. If you watched the proceedings, there's something that you have to do when you plead guilty. Now, if you put in an Alfred plea, like if you go, hey man, I don't think, I'm not guilty, but I think you're probably going to convict me anyway, you can put in what's called an Alfred plea. It's a little different than pleading no contest. I'm not fighting it. It's literally saying you're going to convict me, so I'm going to plead guilty, but it's not, the not contesting it thing. That's not what's happening here. So if you plead guilty legitimately, they want you to get up and say, all right, here's what I did and here's how it went down. So if you're a bank robber, you say, I robbed X number of banks. I didn't use a weapon. I went in, I did this, and this elocution, right? The court wants you to admit your crimes. And one of the reasons is because people get a change of heart. Let me blow my schnoz, people. It's the air conditioning. People get a change of heart after doing their pleas, right? And then they decide they're going to appeal. Now, in the feds, they make it damn near impossible, right, to ever try to appeal after you plead guilty. But people figure out ways. One way which always works is ineffective counsel, right? My lawyer sucked. But if you get a really good elocution where somebody stands up and says, this is what I did. Now, I didn't see him do that today. I did, however. The judge said he wrote a statement. His elocution was written to the court. And there's a gag order on this. And the gag order, an Alfred plea, not to be confused with an Alfred plea, where you request to be Batman's butler. Awesome. That really is awesome. Yeah, that really is awesome. Do you think serving time on death row is easier than general population? Absolutely. Absolutely. And the reason is you're not going to be spending a lot of time around other people, right? Almost every death row that I'm aware of, you're in a single cell, right? So you don't have a cellmate who may decide to kill you for the crime that you did, or may decide to kill you because you break wind a lot, right? Or any of the other reasons that you can end up dead simply because your cellie is a lunatic. So that's off the table. They also don't let you go to yard, okay? Yard is literally the ability to go outside, play basketball, walk around in circles, which is what half of the place does. And on some yards, you can throw horseshoes or whatever. But when you get to death row, that's off the table. Your yard time is 1 hour a day in a cage. And the cage is usually outside, so you're allowed to get a little sun. But you don't have the ability to reach out and touch someone. There may be a person in the cage right next to you. The cage is usually almost exactly the same size as the cell, but it's bars or like almost like a tennis court fence, but made of a stronger material so that you can walk in circles, right? You can get a little exercise. But no one would have got a shot at him if he was on death row. This is going to put him in some form of population. People like to say there's general population, which is population, and then there are special needs yards or check-in yards, right, for people who have crimes that are foul or people that ran up drug debts and couldn't pay them so that they had to check in or whatever the case may be. However, on those yards, special needs and check-in yards, you're still walking the yard with a bunch of people, and those can be dangerous. Hold on one second. Wow, it's a great question, isn't it? What a great question. Having been through your experience as an influencer, well, as a creator, I guess, content creator, and all of the inspiration and the great connections made, would you do it over again despite the unnerving aspects of having a channel? Man, oh man. Yeah, you know what? I would. But I'm going to say a big caveat on that. I'd have done it a hell of a lot different. I would have done it a hell of a lot different. And Tommy, can we, as the now 74 of us, do a little poll in terms of whether or not we think Coberger did it or didn't? I'll tell you what, this guy pled guilty because they were going to convict him. There was not a doubt in his mind that he was going to get convicted. This guy didn't do this for any conspiratorial reason. This guy did this for the only reason, right, that makes sense, because it is exactly what happened. This guy killed them, and he had the ability to write out an elocution. Now, if that elocution did not match any of the stuff from the crime scene, that's a problem. It's also one of the reasons that on a case this big, on a case where you're going to take the death penalty off of the table, right? Because that's going to piss off the parents. And in a lot of cases, they will ask if the family's okay with it, right? So I'll get back to the prosecution again. Why would they do this? Because you don't know what's going to happen. There's a really good chance that maybe you get one guy on the jury or one gal on the jury that doesn't think he did it. And you end up with a hung jury. Now you got to go spend the money, try again, right? And if you get two hung juries, then what? So it's not always a lock that you're even going to be able to convict somebody if you've got amazing evidence. This is a circumstantial evidence case, right? There's no smoking gun. The DNA on the sheath of the knife, the K-bar knife that he bought, it shows premeditation. He bought the knife outside of where he was doing it. He was planning in advance. I'll tell you what, it looked more like a serial killer, right? Didn't look like a guy who was killing for the first time. Put a 1 in the chat if you would love a Q&A about anything and everything. Put a 2 for the original topic. Well, there you go. That kind of poll, huh? The second thing is, if you convict this guy, right? If you convict this guy, which is an if, the odds of getting the death penalty are real damn slim, right? They really are. There are a lot of people who, even if they say, people will say, one of the questions when you're getting on a death penalty case is, if you find that this person should be put to death, could you pull the trigger, right? Would you have the ability to pull the trigger on this and say, yes, this man should be put to death? How often do you think someone who is vehemently against the death penalty says, yeah, I absolutely could do that, in hopes of getting on that jury to save someone's life. Because I promise you, it happens a lot. In fact, they have to hire really talented people to help with the voir dire process, right? To make sure that that you don't get the wrong jury, that you don't get somebody on there that's, so if they went the route they just went, you're guaranteed a conviction. You're guaranteed this guy's going to do life in prison. You're not going to make the family go through listening to the details, right, of exactly how their daughters or their son was murdered for the entire world to hear, right? And a defense that's going to try to, in one way or another, make it sound like, you know what, these girls like to screw around, and they played with each other a lot. There's a lot of pictures. As disgusting as this sounds, this is exactly what a defense would do. You got to poke holes in any way you can, right? If you don't, right, that literally is malfeasance. You are supposed to do everything you can, right? I was against the death penalty until I had children. Changed everything. Barbara Waite, I've heard that from other people as well. Weren't some of the families not happy that they allowed the plea? Yeah. Yep. There's family that wanted to see the death penalty. You know what's really odd? It's very rare that you will meet somebody who has actually been through that situation. Johnny Scoville had a friend who lost a family member, and then the person that did it got put to death. And they went and watched this person be executed, which families are allowed to do. There was no closure, right? The people didn't get what they thought they were going to get, and they were very open and honest about it, right? Now, the person whose blood relative it was literally said it did nothing to give her any kind of peace. The in-law said, you know what? I'm glad the dude's dead. I liked watching him take his last breath, but it did not bring me any peace either. I appreciate that answer. I just can't put myself out there in that way. It's a very commendable thing to do. Dane, I'd do it so much differently if I did it all over again. I would share a hell of a lot less about who I am, right? There's like the scene from 8 Mile where Eminem comes out and smuts himself up so that the next guy can't. Hey, V-bombs, tell them everything that you've done in the past, and then people can't take shots at you. I did that. They sure as hell can take shots at you. And they can make up stuff, right, that didn't happen. Now, I know that there are people who are sober because this channel is in business. And that's a beautiful thing. I'm not saying I got them sober. I promise you I'm not. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. But this channel was here at a time that a student was ready, and people in the chat or whatever we were talking about got something clicking, and that individual is sober. And you know what? There's not much I wouldn't put up with. Mom's spaghetti. That's right, Denise. After they go through the whole investigation, trial, convictions, what the families really want is their loved one back. Yeah, Barbara, you nailed that. V-bombs. Hello, New York. You nailed that. And nothing is going to bring these 4 kids back, right? Nothing. So if you could save them the pain of the entire world sharing the horrific details of how they died, what ends up happening, in my opinion, right, is that the death of your kid becomes so much bigger and so much more talked about. It's so much larger than their life. I'm sure that the family wants to see them dead, right? I'm sure that the family wants to see them dead. It's not going to give them any relief. It's not. But I understand their pain, and I understand their frustration, because this kid, who's pretty close to the same age as theirs, gets to spend the rest of his life living. He's not going to be living well, right? It's probably not any kind of a consolation to the parents. But Dahmer is an example that people like to bring up often, because Jeffrey Dahmer was killed in prison justice, vicious prison justice. A guy took a broom handle, snapped it in half, used it as a weapon, and jabbed it through his throat, right? I have heard stories, and I've seen some pretty ugly things. And there was a great weight pile, a very, very extensive weight pile at one of the federal prisons. And it was considered a white boy yard. I'm not being racist. I'm just saying that this yard was primarily white people. And that's rare in the BOP. You know, it just is. They convict a lot more people who aren't white. It's a very racist system. So to have a yard that is just very uniquely a white boy yard is odd. And this had a beautiful weight pile and blah, blah, blah. And a guy took a 45-pound weight and dropped it on the head of somebody that was working out on a bench and crushed the man's skull. He did it because the man was a Jew. No other reason. This guy didn't do anything to bum him out. This guy didn't do anything wrong against him. He didn't have bad paperwork. He just was Jewish. This is a reality inside of prisons, right? Anti-Semitism, if you think that there's a problem with it on the streets, you should spend just a little bit of time inside, right? Because it's nasty. Like Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger is a fascinating story, right? I have to weigh in on this. I know that this is not necessarily exactly what we're talking about, but I absolutely have to weigh in on this. Whitey Bulger was a federal inmate. And Whitey Bulger managed to, in the parlance, right, of hey, Rocket Queen, if an inmate was saying it, they would say he pulled, right, a nurse. He managed to build a relationship with a nurse who was working in the BOP, and that compromises staff, right? So they don't like this. This is a very big crime. He also was sending his IDs to the street, right? He would get a new one printed off, stick it in the mail, right? Outgoing mail, they don't spend a lot of time looking through, not nearly as much as incoming mail, right? No one's smuggling dope to the street. Unless you're a gangbanger where they're photocopying every bit of your paperwork. There was no gang left for Whitey Bulger. He wasn't ordering hits. He was considered one of the most prolific rats of all time. And he was on a special needs protective care yard. And he was mailing his IDs to someone who was selling them on the street and then putting the money back on his books. And they bitched at him about that. And he just continued to really piss off the BOP. And the fact that he was in protective custody, allegedly, was making a lot of people on the streets really angry. And allegedly, they reached out to him and said, here's the deal, right? This is what's going to happen. You're going to get to a place where we can reach out and touch you. You're literally going to offer yourself up, or we're going to go take out members of your family. Allegedly, this is the reason, because I promise you something. Whitey Bulger had to sign off, for lack of a better way to put it. When you get off the bus at any prison, you sit down with SIS, the people who are the investigative arm, like the cops of jail. And they go through this long speech. Hey, man, have you ever worked with cops? Have you ever done anything that would cause, the fellas on the yard to want to kill you? It's usually not a big deal. If you're at a camp, they're probably not even asking those questions. But at the higher custody levels, they're concerned as hell about that. Now, he was going to a United States penitentiary, a USP. That's the highest custody level in the feds. So when they said, have you ever worked with, he would have had to say, you betcha, I'm Whitey Bulger. Are you kidding? You know my story. They made 2 damn movies about it. But if he said, I want to go out to general population, there's not much they're going to do to stop him. So he said, put me in general population in a wheelchair. They wheeled him in there. He knew he was going to the death. That's what made the Dylan Roof situation with his mother, Emmanuel, murder so amazing. Killed 9 at AME Bible study in, I'm not sure where that is. Families of all killed took the stand in an initial hearing, offered forgiveness. Dylan Roof is one of the all-time pieces of human trash that ever walked the planet. And he's on death row, right? So that would be Terre Haute, Indiana, at the United States Penitentiary. It is the only death row in the feds, so he can't be anyplace else. He's a lowlife, but no one's going to reach out and get Dylan Roof. There's no chance of it happening, or very, very slim chance of it happening. My understanding is at that particular yard, if you don't get any write-ups, if you do not get in any trouble for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever their step system is, then you can request to get out during the day for an hour. Instead of getting out alone like you do all the time, you can get out with one person. And the two of you get to hang out in the day room or whatever. You have to do right for a really long period of time in order to make that happen, which means if someone wanted to hurt him, they would have to spend a lot of time doing right. And they would also have to convince Dylan Roof that they were friends. I would imagine that would be a tall order, right? It reminds you of the joke, right? Of the guy who goes to the monastery, takes a vow of silence. They said you can only talk once every 10 years. Or, yeah, you can't say more than 2 words, and it's once every 10 years. So he does 10 years in there, completely silent, and he says, hard bed. Okay? Nothing. He does another 10 years, right? And he says, cold food. Then another 10 years. And he says, I quit. And the guy goes, well, yeah, you've been doing nothing but complaining since you got here. But right? Sonny says, we all reap what we sow. I would like to believe that. It doesn't always work that way. It really doesn't. Sometimes people fall through the cracks and nothing happens to them, right? The Dylan Roof of the world. He traded his life, right, for infamy. I mean, everybody knows who his name is, right? Now, we do. In 10 years, no one's going to know what that name is. He pissed away his life for ideals that he will grow out of more than likely. For real. It's amazing how many people take a stand that they're willing to trade their life for. And I don't mean die for, right? These people never shoot at a gun zone. They shoot at gun-free zones, right? They never put themselves. You ever see somebody? They all hate the system. And I'm not advocating for this. Don't get this messed up. All right, V-bombs, have a good night's sleep. I'm not advocating for this. But they don't go and take out anybody from the system they hate, right? They're not going and shooting up a police station because everybody there's got guns. These people don't want to die. They just want to be famous or whatever they're getting out of this. It's a kind of a sick thing. Thank you, Rocket Queen. What a kind thing to say. Happy belated birthday to the Scoville brothers. Dirt under the fingernails for some. Yeah. I could quadruple my viewers in a heartbeat. Really? Well, how about that? Hey, who is that? Hold on one second. Here I am, your Rocket Queen. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Just checking. So, knocking out this Kohberger thing. That's why the prosecution was willing to do what they did. Right? That's why they were willing to do what they did. They're guaranteed a victory, right? And they're guaranteed a victory that this cat isn't going to be able to double back on. He's not going to be able to say, I had ineffective counsel. He's not going to be able to say whatever, right? Instead, what's going to happen is he's going to go away and he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And he's not going to spend the rest of his life on death row. He's going to spend the rest of his life, in some kind of general population. And he's going to do that with the wrong last name. And I'm not, trust me, I never joined one of those gangs. I don't have a whole lot of respect for that mindset. I don't badmouth. There are people who join those gangs who don't believe in all of the hate that the rest of them do, but they sure as hell put that hate on their body, right? There were these boys that got murdered in Arkansas, remains unsolved today from that area, and a lot of interesting facts about that case. I'm not sure if I know which one you're talking about, Dane. Joey girl, good to see you. How are you? I'm not sure. Yeah, one of the things, Danique, and I appreciate that, but one of the things that if I could do this all over again, if you go back and watch any of the early Lifeboat stuff, I talked so much about who I was, right? And we got to a point where there were thousands of people in the chats. We did. And I don't know that I was happier. And if I could do it all over again, I would keep a little back, right? Here's the problem. I love doing what I'm doing. I really do. But what you do as a content creator can vary about as much as any regular job could. Like one YouTuber's job can be so much different from the next YouTuber's job that they don't even bear any resemblance. 90% of the people that are going to do YouTube channels, probably a lot higher than that, you'll never see them. they do channels where you might hear their voice, but they're editing stuff together and they're putting it up. To sit in front of a camera and just open up and talk about your life is a rare thing. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I really do. Yeah. He says, true game, Tommy, all mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. No question. Absolutely no question. And the reason that they do is these guys are not, they're cowards. For real. They're cowards. And it's rare. It really is. If you look at most mass shootings, it is so rare that the shooter takes themselves out. Right? Right? It's so rare that they bump themselves off. This is not how it goes. And if they had a mission, if that truthfully was the mission, if Dylan Roof wanted the infamy, why didn't he just leave one in the pipe and take himself out? The official case file says that they were all three run over by a train. The conspiracy is that they actually stumbled upon a cocaine smuggling operation by the Clinton family. For the love of God, send me a link on that. So if you can, shoot me a link to Tommy Scoble. I would love to read that. Sammy Sue says, I'm impressed that you can keep talking and keep up with the chat. Well, that's fairly recent. I mean, I have been doing this for about 3 or 4 years, but I lose my train of thought like that, right? And I scroll all over the place. Never come back to the subject at hand. Since changing my diet dramatically, which is what happened when we moved from where we were, right, to South America, our level of protein, the amount of protein that we were getting in our diet naturally went through the roof. The amount of fish that we were eating went through the roof. And we ended up, I don't walk out of a room and say, what the hell why did I leave this room? What was I going to do? That was an epidemic in my life. In fact, my brother and I were reaching out to people to try to find magic bullets, you know, for what was going on, because both of us seemed to be, we seem to be losing it quicker than people our age. They tried to save those two boys smoked so much weed that they laid down on. They tried to say that those two boys smoked so much weed that they laid down on the train tracks. You know what? That's real good weed. You know, I don't know. I've smoked a mountain of pot in my life, and I did it for. I mean, holy hell! When did I quit? I was probably in my 30s when I quit smoking weed. Right? I smoked it from 13 to 30, and if not really close to my 30s. But I smoked it for a hell of a long time. I never smoked weed that would get me so whacked that I would lay down on a railroad track and not realize a train was coming and that I might want to get out of the way of it. That's a really, really odd. I mean, who the hell's going to buy that? That's a very interesting rabbit hole. I love a good rabbit hole. I really do. In fact, check it out. You know who that is? That's the bunny from Alice in Wonderland. Down the rabbit hole. You know how many times we use Alice in our references in modern culture and people don't realize it's constant. It really is. It's constant. Animal protein and produce, says Sonny. I'm honestly, my brain is doing a lot better. Now, some of that, we talk about this stuff on the lifeboat, but some of that is novelty, right? The dopamine is released into our body for novelty. That really is what is supposed to release dopamine for a lot of reasons. One of which is it will etch on your brain what's going on, right? So the first time you hear a train whistle or you hear a train going by, you know that noise means don't lay down on the track no matter how much weed you smoked, right? That's going to absolutely hammer that into your brain. We stop doing things for the first time probably in our 30s and 40s. So if you move to a different part of the country, well, you're going to look around and things are going to be different than where you were living, and there's going to be a little novelty, and that novelty is going to release, right? I'm late. That novelty is going to release dopamine, and that's going to get your brain working. So when you stop learning and you stop, checking stuff out, you begin to die. It's my humble opinion, and this is not why we did this, right? But we end up in South America, and everything you look at is new. There's just nothing. It's very un-USA here, right? It is so much different, and the language that we're forced to learn is different. So we are, right? That train thing would really ruin your high. Annabelle Black Boots, no question. And I love that you said that. Reminded me of a funny story. Tommy, my favorite Alice scene is when the broom dog sweeps away Alice's path with its tail, yeah, and then goes right around her. So, that's the. I have that path on my back too, as she's walking through Tulgey Wood. Great animated. I'm a fan of all things Alice. I started with the book, but that they did a great job on that. Disney nailed it. Neuroplasticity, Sonny, that's right. That's exactly what I'm talking about. What Annabelle mentioned about the weed killing your buzz. When I was at Sheridan, it was at FCI Sheridan, there were these people that were smoking K2. Now, K2 in the feds is a kind of a general heading for any synthetic cannabinoid, which is odd. I mean, I guess you got to call it a cannabinoid. These things produce symptoms way more like PCP than they do weed. And very often it's mixed as strong as they can get it, right? As dangerous as they can get it, because these guys want to get really high. I've told the stories of the guy locking up where I had to put a magazine in front of them. They freeze, and they may spend 10 minutes looking at something, unable to move. I mean, we had a guy do it in the day room, and we said, dude, they're locking down. If you don't go to your cell, bro, you're going to the hole. You're about to get caught. And this dude's standing like he had been frozen mid, stride, one leg out in front of him. Everybody locked down. They grabbed him, went to take him to medical. And he begins to shriek at the top of his lungs. And I'm not kidding. You can go through your whole life and not see a 35 or 40 year old man screaming as loud as he possibly can, like terrifying screams. And it was just frightening. Tara Jackson says, I used to know Army guys that replaced it K2 for weed. Not the same thing at all, right? Spice is another, they use that, the terms kind of interspersed. Spice usually, when it first came out, they would spray it onto something that made it look like you were smoking a plant, right? It was the chemical they're spraying on it, but at least it looked something like weed. These guys, it would be a piece of paper, right? Someone would mail in a letter, and they would cut the letter into really, or potpourri, exactly. They would cut the letter into really small pieces. That's how they get it in. And these guys smoke it like crack. I mean, they'll hit it, and 30 or 40 minutes later, after the buzz wears off and they're no longer locked up, they'll go hit it again. And I saw some insane things. But while this guy is screaming at the top of his lungs, they're trying to get him out the door to get him to medical. And they're trying to get him to calm down. And it's not happening. And when they got him through the door to get him on was basically a golf cart, right? But it's got a thing on the back of it where you could put someone that's been stabbed or had a heart attack or whatever. It looks like a golf cart. Like they carry people off of NFL fields with. And my cell was right next to that door. So I could look out my window. And my cellmate and I were not particularly close. We just were very different from one another. And the guy didn't say a whole hell of a lot of funny things. And I like people that say funny things. But they decide to hog tie this guy, right? Hands behind his back, feet pulled up, bent at the knees, and they're going to attach your hands to your feet because they're worried about this guy hurting them or himself. And as they start to hog tie him, my cellmate goes, yeah, that's not going to help his buzz at all. And I probably laughed for a half hour. I really did. It was one of those things. Yeah, that shit was at all gas stations. Sonny, here's this crazy thing. Gas stations always have the next buzz. Head shops always have the next buzz, legal buzz. And often those are some of the most dangerous things. Like we all remember probably bath salts. These are, they use analogs, right? It's very kind of close to the drug, but it's not the same. So they had the bath salts that acted like meth. They had bath salts that acted like blow, or like heroin. But we all remember I'm sure we all remember the guy in Florida who tried to chew the face off of the dude that he was in the car with. And he did this like on the median, between two roads, and damn near everybody saw it. And it was terrifying. He's like literally biting into a guy's face. Leavenworth, tough yard. Leavenworth is an odd yard too. Very, very old. an army town plus Manhattan, Kansas is a college town. It's everywhere. Yeah. The reason it became so popular is because they couldn't test for it, right? When you take a drug test for probation or probably the military or anything else, they call each thing they're testing for a panel. And in the old days, it was a 5-panel test. It would test for THC, they look for weed, right? Barbiturates, benzos, cocaine, and opiates, right? And that was usually the 5. And then they started to add to it. Like in the feds, when I was on probation, it was a 32-panel test. Now, I'll tell you something. I couldn't name 32 drugs if my life depended on it. For real, I'd look at the back of that thing and go, you got to be kidding. What the hell is all this? But they were adding all of the different synthetics, and they don't add always the drug. More often than not, they're adding the metabolites. Like, what does your body do to process this poison out? They test for that. But it's kind of sad. Exactly. My brother's over there doing the freeze. It's kind of sad because more often than not, these people would be so much safer if they were doing the actual drug, right? I mean, truthfully, so much safer. I remember a guy that I was in federal prison with, and he was telling stories that most of prison is guys lying about what they did on the street. And most of them know the other guy's lying, right? Because he'll tell you he had 4 Cadillac Escalades. He owned 3 houses, right? He was rich as hell. And then as soon as he's done telling the story, he'll go, hey, can I bum a soup until store day? You know what I mean? Like, he ain't come up with 25 cents to actually buy a soup, but he had all of this on the street. But people just sit around and sort of tell these stories. And this guy was telling us how he got busted. And he said, I was selling and doing bath salts. He chased it up the line. And when they took it out of gas stations, he found I'm not trying to tell anybody how to get this stuff, but there are sites that they're not advertising, hey, we can get you drugs. They advertise something completely different. And once he found out what that was, he was ordering this crap in huge quantities. And I said to him, a lot cheaper, huh? Whole lot cheaper. And he says, no, actually, I was paying more for the bath salts than I was for the meth. And I was like, then why switch? Did you think if you got caught with it, you weren't going to get busted? He's like, no, I knew they were going to bust me because they had passed the analog bill before then. And he knew all this. I said, then what the hell were you thinking? And he said, it got you 500 times higher than meth did. He said, after doing this crap, and he was shooting it, but he said, after doing this crap for a couple of months and then going back to meth, he was like, this stuff's worthless. There was a very big drug bust of this. They were calling it gravel, right? They were selling it in West Virginia, and it was being called gravel because of the size of the, how the drug was, normally the stuff crystallizes like rock candy, right? So they call the crystals shards, and you'll see shards this big and that big. They're all different size. This stuff coming out of China, every shard was the exact same size. So as opposed to looking, for the longest time, I thought bath salts were Calgon. Nice. Great reference. That is funny. Vice documentary shows them doing meth water on the paper, and then they send it into the jail. Yeah. Nowadays, like the feds, for instance, have gotten really good at this. County jails, most county jails now don't allow letters. If you're going to send something in, the only thing that you can send in is a postcard. And the only thing you can send out is a postcard. I remember writing to my then wife as slow as I could, trying to get as much onto this postcard as I could. Just awful. It was all coming out of China, says Sonny, and you are 100% right. So this gravel stuff, when this bust went down, they kind of recoded. They busted the head dude, and he had about 9 guys who were selling for him, and they were selling about 4 different kinds of drugs. One of them happened to be this stuff that they called alpha PVP, right? Alpha PVP, and that was the gravel stuff. And it's just a knockoff version of a very strong drug. I happened to meet the guy who was the head of this sort of West Virginia cartel of sorts. We didn't do time together in the real sense of the word. We went through Oklahoma together, right? Sonny, what an incredibly astute thing to say. People don't seem to understand new weaponry. Yeah, absolutely. So where I moved, there's a drug problem, right? Everywhere on planet Earth, there's a drug problem. But the drug problem here isn't killing people, right, at 300 a day, because it's not made in a lab and designed to kill you. You would think that if there was so much money in selling this stuff that they'd be shipping it all over the world, right? But they're not. There are two countries that are viciously having problems with fentanyl: the United States and Israel. If that doesn't seem odd to you, you're not thinking about it. But those are the two countries that really, really are losing a hell of a lot of people. These are chemical weapons. Make no mistake. If you look at it, you know, how much logic does it take to go, well, the average person who dies from this, more men than women, between the ages of 18 and 55, right? That's about the age you can continue to fight. Now, I realize Army is, 18 to what, like 29 or something like that. But if the ship hits the sand, literally, right, and they come onto the soil of your country, they're going to grab everybody. At the same time, they're allowing millions of people to come into the country, right, through an open border, that all of these people are of military age. And they're not all from South America. They're from all over the world. They just happen to be going through that border. It's got pretty ugly, man, in my opinion. One of the first steps to establishing a new world order is to decrease the population, I've been told, says Barbara. Yeah, and, right, and enslave them. And enslave them. Because I'll tell you something. I spent a long time as a drug addict and as a junkie, right? My drug was an opiate thing. And it takes something, right, to put your hand on the door of a bank, yank that thing open and walk in like, I'm going to rob this, right? That's not normal. That's not logical. It's desperation. I've met a lot of bank robbers, and they don't do it to get rich and drive Ferraris. That's in movies. They do it to buy heroin. Like, everyone I ever met had a drug problem, and they weren't paying bills. They were buying drugs. Hard to imagine taking something you know can kill you because you feel good, for a short time. No, that's Pooh Bear. It's a little different than that. Honestly, only in the beginning does it even get you high. Yeah, a week to 10 days, right? And once you got the habit, what you're doing is you are staving off sickness. That's all you're doing, is you're trying to not get sick, because the sickness is absolutely vicious. We're losing 300 people a day in North America because they don't want to get dope sick. It's that simple. There was a drug that was popular for a hot minute inside of Russia. It got the name crocodile, right? Now, not because of what everyone thinks. Apparently it means something else, but it did cause the skin of people that shot it to look a lot like luggage, right? Almost like the skin of a crocodile, right? Or a nice pair of shoes or boots. But it was literally, the ingredients on this was, what's that drug that isn't, codeine, sorry. Codeine and diesel fuel. I'm not playing with you. The diesel fuel broke down the codeine, and they allowed, right? This was allowed you to take this and inject it. The mortality rate on this stuff was like 99%. For real. Of the people that tried this the first time, you get 100 of them that try it, 99 are going to end up dead. These people would blow a vein out the first time they banged into it. So you see people with track marks, like heroin addicts, right? And they've got marks that go all the way up and down their arms, because you can continue to shoot one, right after the other. And it leaves a little mark going all the way up, right? With crocodile, the first time you put it in, that vein's done. You're never putting anything in that vein again. Now that vein is going to go down, right? It's going to drop down, and it's going to start pushing through other vessels, but that one's gone. And once you've destroyed enough of those, then you're going to cut off an arm, you're going to lose a leg. Crocodile users look like they have leprosy. That's right, Brock Bandy. That's exactly what it looks like. It's just absolute horror. Horror. There have been cases of it found in the United States. Last time I did research on this, the only place they ever found it was in Arizona. Although recently in the South, maybe a couple of months before we moved, they found the ingredients to make it at a storage facility, and a buttload of it. right? A buttload of it. Now, it doesn't seem that anyone was making it, but you say, how does somebody do this? If it looks like you got leprosy and your arms are going to fall off, why in the hell, especially if you saw 40 people where everybody you know has got, losing an arm, how do you shoot that? Because your life sucks so bad, right? Your life hurts so bad that that's a better option. And Russia's come a long way, right? It really has. It looks a lot more like what we're used to over here in America. But when it first was no longer the USSR, there's a lot of people that lost their identity, right? That was their identity. And they have civics class over there that was a little different than how we had it here. They really beat home that they were superior, that they had the first, guy in space. They had the first satellite, right? It is an extreme form of escapism, says Dane Young, and he nailed it. He nailed it. It's exactly what's going on. Thank God that never caught on here. It's scary how addictive opiates are. Tara, the reason that never caught on in the United States is that people aren't losing hope in the United States to that degree. Now, might be coming. It literally might be coming because they're losing hope enough, right, to do a drug that they know has a really good chance of killing them. They know that these pills, right, what did they say? 1 out of 6, something like that, has more than 2 milligrams of fentanyl, which can absolutely kill you and take you off the planet. And it's the #1 cause of death in North America. Yet, they continue to do it. Now, what would happen if, just going out on a limb, right? What would happen if 3 months from now, the people that are pumping this stuff across the border went and turned off the faucet, right? Turned off the faucet. Now you're not getting any more of that stuff. Well, you're going to get dope sick viciously. And there's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. You're going to get sick. And if Crocodile shows up the next day and someone says, this will make dope sick go away, the person will put it in their arm. It's a terrible thing to think about, right? It is a terrible thing to think about. My dad didn't do that, but had a few abscesses he had from booting. I'll tell you what, I have scars on my arms. If you ever meet me in person, it's probably one of the first things that you would notice. I have white lines that are about that long. And every one of them was a place that they had to lance. I did it. I watched the doctor do it once. And from that point on, I did it myself. But you get abscesses that start to look like golf balls or softballs, and you got to poke a hole in it and drain it. And it is what it is. I walked away, right, which is amazing. The odds are not in your favor. If that's your drug of choice, you really screwed up. And statistically speaking, you're probably going to die addicted to it. The numbers are horrific. However, there have been some great strides made in things like Subutex or Suboxone or the shots that they give instead. There are so many, methadone, there are a lot of different ways now to attack that addiction. There's medical assisted treatment, and there are less people, right, that look at you like a leper. We're starting to understand more as a planet that this is a disease. We're starting to understand that this is a disease. And once you look at it that way, and once you treat it that way, people are more willing to come forward. Because if the other option is you, weak SOB, you don't have the willpower, like, hey, your cousin Tony tried that crap and he just walked away from it. Yeah, he's not a drug addict. He's not a drug addict. He doesn't have that precursor. It's like saying to somebody, well, you know what? Your brother drinks all the Coca-Cola he wants. He does a bunch of sugar products. He didn't end up getting diabetes. Huh? Tara Jackson says, I'm not trusting Suboxone. I know a lot of people who use it and love it, but I feel that you shouldn't be prescribed Suboxone forever and ever. There's something wrong with that, although whatever works. You know what? Here's the deal with that. It's trading one drug for another, but it's an excellent trade. And there are people that can get off of it, right? God bless them. There are people that can't. And for the people that can't, let's say that one person goes into a Suboxone clinic and he's been getting high for 10 years, shooting dope. The next guy in has been shooting heroin for 40. The receptors in that dude's brain aren't going to take it. They're not. Those receptors, the MU receptor is going to drive that person insane, literally. It's going to make you tear at your skin if you can't get that receptor turned off. And Suboxone sort of spray paints that receptor so that you're not walking around high. More importantly, you don't have to go steal $900 worth of shit to pay for your drug habit that day, right? So while I completely understand what you're saying, because it's sad, we would be a lot happier if people could walk away and never have to do it again. But some of them aren't going to have that opportunity. And it's a hell of a trade. It's a great trade. A drug that you do once a day versus a drug that every 8 hours you got to stick a needle in your arm, And by the way, if I'm sounding like I'm being preachy, I was the most unbelievably negative person about any kind of medical assisted treatment. I was the one that said, all they're trying to do is get you addicted to a drug that they can sell you. I've heard of retroactive withdrawal from Suboxone. That's why it's scary to me. Terry Jackson. A lot of the people who talk about things like retroactive withdrawal, there's a ton of stuff with Suboxone that are people that simply don't want to say, you know what, I relapsed. Or I can't do this, I'm going to go back. And, it's like, I don't know if you remember recently, look at the last decade anyway, there were like 7 kids that all ended up in the hospital from smoking, you ready? From vaping. What's the name of that popular one? The little square numbers? Juul, right? Juul pods were killing people, right? And those Juul pods put these kids in the hospital. Didn't make sense, right? It just didn't make sense. Why? Because everybody else in America was doing it. What the hell happened in this little cluster in one town? So the critical thinkers went, I don't think that's what this was. But they were youngsters, and they didn't want to say to their parents, guess what? I was buying bootleg cartridges on the street that had weed in it, that had THC in it, and they screwed up making the stuff, and it caused a lung infection that they didn't know how to treat, and it killed these people, right? 8 hours is stretching it. For me, I had to do it every 8 hours. Congratulations, 10 years off. God, good for you, Tara. That is awesome. That's awesome. And you know what? I will never badmouth any way that anybody gets sober. I won't. I used to. And then I got a chance to meet a lot of people who are trying to beat it. And it's different with everybody. It really is. It's different with everybody. And I have a concept that's going to blow minds, and I shouldn't say it out loud, but you know what? I'm gonna, because we're going to do the honesty thing too. You can be addicted to a drug for 5 years, right? You're dependent on it because your life was miserable. And every day you did this stuff. Then you end up in a rehab. And you know what? They give you some benzodiazepines. You sleep for 7 to 9 days. And when you come out of it, you do some therapy. Within 3 or 4 years, within 3 or 4 days, within 3 or 4 weeks, 3 or 4 months, you're right as rain. Science would say that you're that miracle addict. I would say you weren't a drug addict in the first place. You can grab a person can get addicted or dependent, would be a better word. Anybody can get dependent on heroin. You could shoot up a minister, you could shoot up a cop, you could shoot up anybody. And if you did it for 14 days, right? Or 5 if it's good shit, and you're going to be addicted to it, right? Or dependent on it. Then those people all go into rehabs, and 2 of them go, boom, I'm done. Woohoo, nothing to it. I'm never doing that again. Boy, that stuff was awful. And the others can't. I mean, literally can't. Well, one of those, those 2 people may have been dependent on that drug, right? But might not be addicted to it. I know that sounds really kind of odd. And I'm not, I'll tell you right now, I was not me. I'm not that cat. I'm a stone cold junkie. If I get anywhere near that stuff, I will never, ever again be doing this show, be trying to help people. I'll be gone so quickly. This is a concept that people struggle to understand because it's really weird. But if you're actually an addict, your addiction grows whether you're feeding it or not, right? And I watched this happen to me. I went into prison and I had about a 2 gram a day habit. I went into the state for the first rip, maybe 3 grams on a good day. And I managed to not do it for about a year, a little over a year. When I got out, I did a 10 bag about 3 days in a row. But within 2 weeks, I was doing a 1/4 ounce a day. And it never made sense to me until I started to study this stuff. We, the world population, are the drug medicine guinea pigs. There's something to be said for that. Didn't Ray Charles do heroin and go to rehab just once and never used again? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And it happens to a lot of people. It really does. You'll hear people say stuff like, yeah, it never made sense to me, even alcoholics. I had a friend, ended up becoming a real estate salesman, made a ton of money, but I went to college with him. And every single day of college, he drank. He drank an ungodly amount of beer every day except Friday and Saturday. Friday and Saturday, he would either buy tequila or he would buy bourbon, and he would drink a 5th. Now, when college ended, he walked away from it. And I mean, everybody said there's never been a bigger alcoholic on planet Earth. Now, if he had walked away from it literally, he would have died. The guy had to be given benzodiazepines or it would have been the end of his life. But once they weaned him off, he was like, yeah, I'm never drinking again. That didn't work out for me. About a year later, started to drink. But he drinks 2 or 3 beers. He's a very normal person. I think the stress of college may have been, he'll go 3 or 4 months at a whack without drinking, and then he'll drink a little bit. Like, an alcoholic is not capable of doing what this guy does. I would have bet my life he was an alcoholic. He was stupendously dependent on booze. And we had a conversation about this as an adult. And I said to him, what was going on in college? And he said, I'm not comfortable telling you what was going on in college. But there was a lot of things happening in his life that were nowhere near that campus, family stuff, that he was running from. If you're miserable, right, you can become physically dependent on anything to make that stop. Okay? And if there's nothing there, you'll sniff glue, right? You'll inhale gasoline, the things that do whatever's possible to make it go away, right? I think truly it could be a scarier prospect to raw dog reality, being okay with yourself in the quiet moments and getting better at quieting that annoying voice in your head. I'll tell you what, one of the things that you will hear from addicts, right, especially heroin addicts, he was physically dependent, not an addict. Yes, I would say that that's exactly what it was. And when his life got happy later on down the line, wasn't an issue. Brings up the rat utopia, right? The rat park, as opposed to the miserable rat that sat in a cage way too small for itself with another rat, right? It was like being in a prison cell. Guys in prison will do anything, right? Anything to cope with prison. They'll smoke K2. There was a guy who's had a parent smuggle him in the powder, and you would take the powder of this K2 stuff and you mix it with denatured alcohol or something. I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was denatured alcohol. They couldn't find that in prison. It wasn't that easy. So they tried smoking just the powder. Didn't work. Didn't work. So the next step, no lie, floor stripper. They used floor stripper to mix in with this stuff and smoke. And it was doing really bad things to people's brains. And the word got out pretty quickly that this was different because, yeah, nutmeg. Did you do time, Sonny? Everybody in prison that has ever worked in a kitchen has eaten enough nutmeg to try to get high, and it will absolutely get you high. It will also do things to your ability to go to the bathroom that will talk you out of ever doing it a second time. And it's more of almost like a psychedelic buzz, and that's not such a nice thing in prison. Yes, my favorite drug study. I reference that study probably once a week in everyday conversation. Connect to the opposite of addiction. That's right. Connection is the opposite of addiction. And it's fascinating to me the number of people that have gotten on Suboxone because they were addicts, did it through the lifeboat. People that I got to know who were only on Suboxone for 3 to 4 weeks, literally. They tapered off and it was like, poof, miracle. Why? Well, because they started journaling, right? They started exercising. They started eating 3 meals a day. Holy crap, they're sleeping. If you, like Hugh used to say to me, if you didn't do it when you were getting high, start doing it. If you were doing it while you were getting high, quit doing it, right? People that just walk away from the substance and say, I honestly, I feel guilty because I hear everybody else's stories, right? About how awful it was for them and how much, well, at least they're feeling awful for them, because in years past, they would have just said, I have willpower. That person doesn't. See? And then it isn't a disease anymore, is it? It's and I'm not saying, look, it's a disease of choice. You know, my daughter is a genetic time bomb. Her mother is an addict and was addicted to heroin and alcohol. And she's got me as a dad. And there's so much addiction in this family tree that she would be in a lot of trouble. And she knows that, right? For real. Never, ever has tried anything, because she's very aware of the fact that if she does, she's going to like it. Tara says, drugs may be bad for us, but they are very, very interesting to me. Absolutely. Fascinating. Fascinating. It really is. That's why I said earlier, I don't think prescriptions forever are weird. I knew people that used it for a few weeks, and that was it. And they were good. They may not have been drug addicts, right? Crazy, isn't it? They were certainly physically dependent, but they may not have been drug addicts. I'll tell you a great example of a guy, right? Me. Me. I journal every day. I work out. I do everything right. And I tapered all the way down. And I got off the stuff. And I didn't relapse. But that receptor made my life miserable. Made my life mother-loving miserable. And I went and got back on it. And when I talked to the doctor, I said, I feel like a failure. Right? I feel like a failure. He said, why? I said, well, because I was really wanting to get off of this stuff. He said, if I was giving you this medication, right, for your heart, would you try to get off of it? And I said, no, but that's different. He said, is it? If you're treating heart disease, that's one thing. But if you're treating this other disease, it still has that stigma of a piece of shit if you can't get off of this stuff. And I'm not saying you, Tara. But there are so many people who just say, you're not sober. By the way, if anybody says to you, you're not sober, get as far away from that person as you possibly can. I mean it. Get as far away from that person as you possibly can, because they ain't right. They're not. Like you've heard California sober, right? California sober is people that smoke weed instead of doing heroin or doing alcohol or blow or whatever. And I know a guy that literally traded crack cocaine for a joint a day. I just want to hug him, right? I'm not telling him he's not sober, I promise. You only knew those people through pills? Yeah. Psychedelic buzz in prison would not be ideal. Crazy as this sounds, I knew a guy that had acid mailed into prison. Like they dosed, yeah. I said to him, I wouldn't take that crap if you knocked 6 months off my sentence. The idea of tripping in prison is the scariest concept in the world. They did that to Whitey Bulger, by the way. You can research this. Whitey Bulger signed up for a study to get $56 or $53, and I don't remember whether it was 90 days or 180 days off of his sentence. And they were jabbing him with a needle. And they were talking about things like quarter grams, right? I don't know how much you know about acid, but they put micrograms of acid on things, not quarter grams or half grams. And Whitey Bulger described it as the most horrific experience of his life. And that's why they no longer allow people who are in prison to volunteer for things like that, because everyone will. I mean, when I was in there, especially toward the end of my ripple, my dad was sick. If they said, you know, we're going to shoot you up with some crocodile, but it's going to knock a year off your sentence, I might have done it. I might have done it. You can't make a decision. You can't consent under that kind of situation, because the inmate knows only one thing. It is better to be free. Right? I am absolutely a drug addict. I am absolutely a drug addict. Now, there are people who get dependent on opiates who they are dependent, right? Doesn't make them a drug addict. Does mean that they would have to get off of it slowly, but they could walk away from it. I'm not built that way. It's plain and simple. I'm also, I don't think I'm built to be able to do the rest of my life without doing something to put that receptor to bed. Now I do Sublocade, which is a very different substance. You shoot it in your tummy once a month. And if you get a doctor that's cool, he'll squeeze some of it out into the sink and start taking you down, right? Because you can get by with a lot less of that. And I know people who have been very successful on very small amounts of it. The one complaint I would have with Sublocade is that the very first day that I take it, I'm a little fuzzy. Like I don't think real well that day at all. And I wouldn't call it a buzz, but I would say that I can't make a lot of sense. Electric Kool-Aid acid test. Thank you, government. Yeah, you know what? At least we got the Grateful Dead out of it. A hell of a band, right? They were the house band for the Electric Kool-Aid acid test. Yeah, Tara Jackson says, always thought that being spun out on meth in jail would be like hell. I did it at Victorville during a lockdown because I said to the guy that I got my stuff from, I'm like, dude, we're getting locked down. And you could look out your window and see guys with guns coming onto the yard. I had never seen that before in my life. Literally, guys with guns coming. And I said, this is bad. We're going to be locked down a long time. And we were. It was months. But I was like, you got to help me. And he threw me 3 good-sized balloons, and I was so happy. And it turned out that it was speed. And I did it because there was nothing else. And I had said to a guy the night before, I want to paint my cell. And he got me like a little salt seasoning thing, like you would have any kind of seasoning in, so like that tall, about that fat around. He had that full of white paint. I just wanted to touch up a couple of places. And I said to him, get me a paintbrush. And he thought he was funny as hell. And he brought me a paintbrush that was about the size of a toothbrush. And he's like, I said, what the hell is this? He goes, I figured you could nail it out with that. Then this lockdown happens. And I did paint the inside of my cell. Everywhere where there was a black mark, right? I'm doing it with this itty bitty little damn paintbrush. The kind you'd almost get to do your eyeliner. Like it's really, really small. And one of the cops that worked came out in the morning and just went, dude, how much speed did you do? I was like, I mean, instant panic. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, you just painted your cell with an effing Q-tip. He's like, you want to tell me what the hell you're on? I was like, no, honest, I wasn't on anything, sir. But it was such a long lockdown that, by the time they would have got you out of there, they weren't pulling anybody out of the cell for nothing. But I did paint that entire thing. I did. It was miserable. And I'll tell you something else I learned how to do. I'm bragging to the guy in my vent. I was like, he goes, did you get some stuff? I said, I did. I'm like, I got a pile of it. And I'm all happy. And he's like, I barely got any. But he got the black. And I said to him, oh, man, this is speed. He's like, let's fish through the vent, and I'll trade you some black for some clear. The vent holes are, I'm not kidding you, that big, right? They're so small, like a vent. And I sat and picked and picked and picked and picked and picked until I got that hole big enough that we could get something through. And he did the exact same thing. If you got enough time, right, you literally can do anything, man. You literally can do anything. All right, peeps. I really appreciate you. Between now and the next time I see you, put a little love in your heart. And if you see someone that's hurting, just do your best to never say who's sober and who's not. I promise you. Trade some black for some clear. Honestly, what he said was, how would you like to trade some black for some shabibble? Because that's what they called it there. But I didn't think anyone would know what that was. The other thing you would hear them call it was clear, right? But at that particular yard, they called it shabib or shabibble. No idea why. That was determined long before I got there. And it is not my get down at all, but goes to show you, right? I'm on a lockdown. I hate my life. And that stuff was there. And I did it. And I probably would have huffed gasoline if that was the only option. I hated where I was. I hated my life. I was the rat in the cage with another rat. Between now and the next time I see you, try to be kind. Put a little love in your heart. I'm Tommy. We'll see you on the next one. This was The Love Boat. Have a good